Hi, my name is Troy Tueller. I wanted to make a video talking about some setup tips. So recently, a guy, Hanzo, it's been a long time since you requested this. I'm sorry, I've been very busy. But I've talked to, he was asking me about all these different variations of how to set up, like a short arm hooker versus a tall arm top roller, or a short arm top roller versus a tall arm hooker, and like every single variation of that. And although it is a good question, I will say that that could kind of make for sort of a convoluted video where I'll take too much time sort of yapping and like getting too like technical with these things, when really all you need to do is just arm wrestle and just get out there, grab different hands, and understand how it works, because everybody's different. Like, I can tell you the theories of what a short arm top roller should do against a tall arm top roller, but that short arm top roller that you might meet in a tournament might arm wrestle just differently. So I don't want to get too complicated here, and I'm going to just talk about some setup tips that I think would be good to understand. So first off, I wanted to talk about something related to the strap. So when setting up the strap, it's important to understand that it wraps around the back of your hand and, of course, your opponent's hand, around your opponent's wrist, and around your wrist, right? So we're going to apply the strap here in a second, just to give you an example. Okay, so we have the strap on here now. So you'll see, once again, as I said, that you have the strap around your opponent's wrist and your wrist, right? Now, plain and simple, once you get set in the strap and you start applying your pressures, you know, once you pull against the strap, it's going to pull against the strap of your opponent, right? Literally, when I bend my wrist, his wrist will bend. When I pronate, his wrist will bend. Right? And it's same case for him, right? Even if he kicks, even if he pronates, or even if he kicks back, he will literally like pull my hand, away from me, right? Because we're tied together. It's harder to have the skin slip. The strap really confines you guys, right? So when thinking about that, you also have to understand when setting up with the strap, right? You'll notice this gap between our wrists, right? It's not very large. It's from pretty much from here to here, not a very large gap. And you'll notice that depending on when like the referee is setting the strap for you, that how far away you separate your wrist will change how the strap feels, right? So I'm going to loosen this. I'm not going to take it all the way off, but just to set an example, let's say instead of being close like this, when the ref is setting the strap, now usually he's going to have you palm to palm just to make it easier, around center table. But it's not, in a referee's grip, you'll have to be very stationary and set in the center. But let's just say it's not even referee's grip. They're just setting the strap, right? So they're setting you up. If you actually set your elbow in a way where you are creating more of a gap between your wrists, and then they tighten the strap, right? Now, when I move my elbow forward, the strap loosens a little bit. Right? There is less tension, because before there was tension when you're all the way back here. But now he's like, okay, take a grip. After he's tightened it down, you'll take a grip. You can come forward and you can actually, once that strap loosens, it's easier to loosen the strap and kind of ratchet through and get, maybe a different grip, right? It's a looser strap around this strap, around your wrist, right? So that could mean a few things, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But now let's think of it the opposite way. Well, actually, sorry, pardon me, before we get into that. So with the strap being loose around your wrist, let's say we're set, so we get a neutral position, we're pretty steady. Now ref says go. He's only really going to start feeling the pressure through this strap once I hit that tension, right? Because strap is looser, looser, looser. All of a sudden I'm here. Now, where I set my elbow during the setup, now we're in that tension spot. So now from here, he's going to feel it more in his wrist, right? Now we'll set it up differently. So once again, strap is loose, blah, 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 blah. Now you'll see I'll put my elbow closer to the front of the pad. And maybe he will too, just so we can kind of make an example of it. But basically, look how close our wrists are now. The gap is much smaller. So now we'll tighten the strap. So it's getting tighter around our wrists and up here. And now there's tension this close. So now, once we get set up, we're in a neutral position. The ref says go. Now, as soon as I start moving back, now it's creating tension off the get-go, instead of creating tension only when I drag all the way back to where I was before, right? So the point is that you'll notice that if you can separate, either create a gap between the wrists or close the gap between the wrists while they are setting the strap. You can create tension differently. Now, the benefits of this: when you are closer, when you close that gap and you have a tighter strap off the get-go, this would mean that as soon as you start dragging your elbow back, you are creating tension. Think of it as almost offensive, right? Like you want it to be to where like your elbow's close, or even like before the ref says go, you're already setting your elbow back here and creating tension in your opponent's wrist, right? You are setting the strap in a way while he's tightening it, so that way when you start dragging back, boom, you're creating tension, right? There's an example. Or you could think of it in a defensive manner. So before, when I said, okay, we set the strap with a gap between the wrists, tighten it. Now, let's say I'm the taller arm wrestler. So just to like show that for an example, now what's happening is usually the taller arm wrestler has the ability to sort of follow because he has a tall arm and like the shorter arm guy has to work with more pad, while the tall arm guy can just kind of follow with his length, right? So I created that gap between the wrists to where we're only going to feel that tension when we are back to where we were, right? So now David's going to start trying to pin me, and he'll drag his elbow back, right? And then he keeps going, and then now he's feeling the tension. But you'll see he's running out of pad. You see where the pad would be here. He's out of pad, while I still have so much more room to work with, right? Because only once he got back there is when I really started feeling the tension in my wrist, right? So this is what I'm talking about, is when you end up in the straps, right? It could vary depending on who you pull or how you pull, but the idea is that when you get your wrist closer to your opponent's wrist and they wrap that around and tighten the strap, then it will likely create more tension when you are close, and then as soon as you go back, you'll create a ton of tension. But if it's loose and there's more of a gap, then there's less tension in the strap, and you can work, you can climb, you can maneuver, you can be more defensive. These are the things that you can do, right? So there's an example of a tip with the straps, right? So we'll take this off now, and I'm going to talk a few things about thumb placement, right? So more setup tips regarding, thank you, David, is how you set your thumb. It is very important to understand that controlling your opponent's thumb is how you control their hand, to a degree at least. There are obviously other aspects, but controlling the thumb is very important. So how you can set your thumb, and you might actually want to come around here to get the different angle. And here, I'll move this light real quick. How you set your thumb, depending on how you pull, is very important, right? So a good top roller wants to be pretty much set with a static pronation in the setup, right? He wants to be set to where he feels like his pronation is already set before the go, right? So somebody who is a good top roller might want to push their thumb forward and down in order to kind of create a turning motion, right? So now I'm literally, and David will feel this, how I'm shoving my thumb into his webbing, right, to get kind of a depth there. And now, and you'll feel, David, how I am already getting my pronation set, right? Right? So once I start applying my pressures, then that pronation comes out even more, right? So you might need to practice this. This will be something where you'll have to just experiment and kind of mess around with practice with different guys, different hands, different arm wrestlers. But think about how you place your thumb. Not just how you shove it, but even depth, right? Somebody who maybe needs more control through the fingers and containment might want more depth, right? So he will literally bring his thumb closer to his opponent's. So now here, actually, we'll do it with David. So if I'm all the way out here, right, our thumbs are pretty separated. It's not likely, this is just an exaggeration. It's not likely that any opponent would like to be set up like this. But when David closes his hands, right, there's, he's got like a bigger hand than me, but you can see how his fingers aren't really that far around the back of my hand, right? But now, if we go really deep, now he's got way more of a grip on my thumb. His fingers are further down the back of my hand, and he has a deeper grip that's better for containment, right? So there's another example of how depth, whether either coming more forward or more back, let's say I'm a top roller and I don't want my thumb to be swallowed up by this big hand, so I will bring my thumb back and try to create this big, like make my thumb bigger by stretching out. So that way when he closes his hand, now I've filled that gap and he has less of a grip on my thumb, right? So thumb depth is very important, right? Daniel Procopciuc actually made a video. I'll probably put it in the link, a link to that video in the description for this video. Daniel Procopciuc, who is an excellent Moldovan, I think he's from Moldova, arm wrestler, world class, like elite arm wrestler, made a video giving tips about how to set up your hook. And I'm going to kind of show that here, but I highly recommend you check out the video in the description because he explains it very well. But yeah, the idea is simple. So when you're a short arm hooker, or even just a hooker in general, really, you want to try to have a top roller. Let's say this is really like a grip to set up if you're a hooker going against a top roller. You really want to try to have the top roller come further down your wrist, right? Like you don't want them to have all that height. So Daniel Procopciuc, who is a shorter arm wrestler as well, he sets up in a way where he'll put his elbow pretty far to the front of the pad, and he will highly rise and sort of create this control where he is requiring his opponent to come down, to come further down, because he's basically ducking his thumb, right? Because the thumbs must be visible in the setup before the go. So if you set up in a way, and I'll just keep your hand open, where instead of just, some guys like to do this thing, especially real amateurs, where they'll like dig in like this and try to get like a grip there. And while yes, that can be beneficial, there are also just kind of flaws to it, right? Because the thing is this guy's not going to let you do that. And then you're just going to be fighting, he's not going to let you get all the way around here. But what you could do is if you bring your palm closer to the center, what's happening is that, and you'll actually come around to this other side, you'll see my palm is kind of going past his thumb and creating this gap, right? So I'll set my thumb and then he'll close his hand, and you'll see how I've created this gap now, right? And so as soon as the ref says go, all I have to do is come forward and I have filled that gap. And now you'll see how much of a good angle I have here in the hook. I have my shoulder set, I have my hand deeply cupped and supinated, right? And that's because instead of trying to be like this and get around and then have the top roller still have his thumb set, I have created a gap to where the top roller doesn't have as much of a grip on my thumb, and even had to drop his knuckles to make sure knuckles are showing. So now once he starts applying his top roll pressures, go ahead, David, he falls into my hand, and now I have the cup, right? So this is an example, right? Elbow placement and thumb setting, whether you purposely set your thumb in a way where you're going to pronate or hook or even flop, like anything. And this is where you'll have to get experimental because everyone arm wrestles differently. If you can understand how to place your thumb to where you can manipulate and control your opponent's thumb, you will control the hand way easier, right? So this is just a practice thing, right? Go to practice, grip up with some other guys, and think about how you're going to set your thumb. When you get your elbow more forward, you're going to be more posted up, so you might end up having to drop your knuckles, but you can still set your thumb in a way, right? So you might be giving up things, you might be taking things. This is where it gets experimental, and this is where I didn't want to get convoluted with Hanzo's question. Sorry, Hanzo, but I figured this would be better information. Think less about I didn't want to make a video just like talking too much about all these individual pressures, just these tips on how to set up, on thinking about your thumb placement and thinking about how you can use the strap, like I said, that wrist gap that I mentioned before, whether you want it tighter or further away. These are all things that you can now consider when you're setting up for your arm wrestling match. So yeah, I think that's about it. I just wanted to explain those things. I hope it wasn't too complicated. If there's any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. And of course, please check out that video by Daniel Procopciuc. It's a very educational video, very good information there. Thank you, David Wilson, for helping me out, and Kessler for recording. Yeah, thank you for watching.